Welcome to Week in Horror.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
The only podcast that will feed your horror need.
The need to feed.
With JL.
Yeah, I'm a fucking masochist. I'll watch that shit.
Eugene.
Somebody has to be the sex symbol, I'm sorry.
Alex.
Shit, I just demonetized this forever.
And Johnny O.
How do you like that shit? Got halfway through the monologue before unmuting myself. Golly, it's one of them fucking days.
With industry guests.
Hi, this is Richard Oakes, Director of Host.
Hey, this is Adam Leader, Director of Host.
This is Matthew Mark Hunter.
I'm Donna Nelly.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
And this is Week in Horror.
And you're listening to Week in Horror.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
News, trivia, and more.
One by one, we will take you.
Join our live show Wednesdays at 7 Central, youtube.com/weekinhorror, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Week in Horror. Stay scared. I was muted there. Welcome, horror fans. It is Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. That means it's time for another fresh episode of Week in Horror Podcast. The only podcast where the next scream you hear may be your own. I'm so ridiculous. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast host, you can join us here on YouTube for our live show, where you too can get in on all the bloody fun. What are you waiting for? Join us. This week, we are covering select horror films released June 26th through July 2nd. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am JL, and with me tonight is Aaron.
Hello there.
So, many of you in the live chat may notice we're doing something a little bit different today. That's because every single movie we're talking about tonight came out before, like, 1964. It's like all of it was like 40s, 50s, and 60s tonight. So we thought we'd have a little fun, and we go way back in the Wayback Machine before color became a thing. And here we are in fresh black and white. It was just funny because I was showing Aaron, because we were setting up the stream, and I showed Aaron the outro. And the outro animatic actually looks really, really cool in black and white, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, I don't see it being a permanent change, though, because it's setting me off a little bit. I'm like, something's broken.
All right, so a bunch of cool movies to talk about tonight, but the first big thing that I wanted... Well, actually, before we dive into it, let's see who we got in the live chat tonight. Let's say hi to all of our magnificent fans. Let's see, and of course, there are our patrons down there below on the banner. Thank you all so much for all of you for helping us to support the show, or for helping to support the show and making it awesome. Let's see, we got Joshua Lee is in the house. Says I, Peter Graves, and I'm Peter Graves, and I. Good to see you, Joshua Lee. Thanks so much for being here, one of our amazing patrons, as well as Mr. Malort, all the way from Chicago. Says, being a former member of the 33rd Infantry Brigade, we wear our unit citation at the Battle of Lakeshore Drive with pride. That is a fantastic comment there, and plays into the very first film we're going to be talking about tonight. So fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Malort. And I see Ivy Gentry's in the house. Says hello. Good to see you, Ivy Gentry. Travis Brown as well, another one of our amazing patrons. Says, hey there, fucking horror nerds. Good to see you, Travis Brown. Appreciate you being here. And I see Sarcasm's in the house as well. Good to see you, Sarcasm. Thank you so much for being here, bud. We do super appreciate it. And I see... Where's he at? Yep, that's right. Sarcasm, we are going black and white tonight. And Sarcasm is also one of our amazing patrons. We do appreciate it. Charlie Welch is in the house. Another of our amazing patrons says, spooky. Yes, it is spooky. The only difference is I couldn't recreate the lightning flashes, which would have been cool. Like, random lightning flashes would be neat. Something I have to look into. But we really dig this. Angel Rivera is in the house as well. Good to see you, Angel Rivera. Thank you so much for being here. Another one of our amazing patrons, as well as Tony Regime is in the house. Good to see you, Tony Regime. Says hello, Week in Horror. And Aaron. Aaron is a part of Week in Horror. He's one of our guys. I haven't been able to cut a new trailer yet that will have him on it. So it will eventually have him on it. I promise. Jinju's in the house says Aaron is smoking gloves. Harsh, man.
Cloves. So we got the brown.
You got the... Are you smoking those Jarum Blacks?
No, these are actually hand rolled. I ordered them online. And I custom made and still dirt cheap.
I remember when I was like 18 and 19 years old, and I went through kind of a goth phase, and there was a club, there was a nightclub in Dallas over in Deep Ellum. It was over off Swiss and Good Latimer, called the Lizard Lounge, and every Thursday and Saturday night they had what they did called the church, and the church where they played like goth EDM and shit like that, and and so we used to go out there and hang out there Thursdays or Sunday nights for the church, and of course everybody out there is like, oh, I'm so like gothy and pretentious and stuff, and like smoking cloves and shit. It was a time. Hell, what was it? It was 1998. It was like 97. It was like 98, 99. Early 2000s when I could start drinking legally.
They banned a lot of that stuff now, like all the flavored ones. Some of the cloves and stuff are illegal now. I'm like, all right, I guess. I didn't think they were that tempting.
I remember back then it was like, it was going out there, having to stop by like the convenience store, stop by the 7-Eleven and be like, yeah. And it was always Sunday night. It was always church night. If you caught me in a convenience store buying a pack of GRMs, and I was like, yeah, let me get those, yeah, because I'm all like, ugh.
Ate ramen for a week because you spent too damn much on a pack of cigarettes.
Right. Oh, good to see you, Jinju. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it. I saw someone new in the chat. Richard Meter is in the house. JL, I joined last night to become subscriber number 600. Richard, you are the man. You pushed us to 600 subscribers. We do appreciate that. Thank you so very, very much. So soon, hopefully we will hit that 1,000 mark. We hit that 1,000 mark and we can actually monetize the channel, because we're well over the view hours, considering each episode of Weekend Horror is like 2 hours long. So we're well over the view hours, and I cannot wait to hit, if we could hit 1,000 subscribers when we get to like season 4, that would be amazing. That would be so beyond cool.
Be cocaine and hooker days, yeah.
Oh yeah. What else we go spend it on? We can't even afford color here. All right, let's see. So, Mr. Lord says, man, I could go for a clove while listening to Jesus and Mary Chain. Am I right? Yes. The Sisters of Mercy, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Aaron's like, whoa, way back machine.
No, you're only a few years ahead of me. I'm 39. I cannot remember. They did something like that at a local club called Shotzi's, and they did it once a month. And they would come in and they would do the suspension and stuff. And it was the only place in the city where you didn't have to have. It was 18 or up anyway, but it was the only place in the city where you had nudity without going to a strip club, because it was quote unquote art.
Yes.
Where they were dancing up there. Like
they did that. They did it at the church. They would have sexy. They'd have like sexy nun night, where girls could come in dressed like sexy nuns and do that stuff. And they also, but there was also a lot of BDSM community that went out there. So there's a lot of whips, a lot of chains, a lot of bondage going around. It was an awesome experience. I think it was really, really cool. But only on Thursday. Sadly, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the Lizard Lounge closed down. So it was like a staple in my life from the time I could go to clubs from 18 till I was like probably 24, 25, and it was just, I was there a lot, and it was where, it's one of the first nightclubs I ever drank legally at, and unfortunately it did not survive. One of the oldest and one of the most popular. It was actually used in episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. That's how popular it was. They would clear out the floor area of all the, and they'd use it as like a mock-up strip club, which it wasn't, but it was just hilarious. But unfortunately, it did not survive it didn't survive the pandemic, which is a shame. Same with a lot of places in Dallas, like the Clubhouse didn't survive, which was a shame.
We had a pirate bar that got shut down back in I think 03, 04. Pirate themed bar got shut down because it had an internal epidemic of herpes that just shot throughout the place. I think they just gave up and shut it down. But yeah,
Ouch.
Everybody was coming out of there with the burn going on.
All right, let's see who else we got here. Donnie Does That's in the house. Good to see you, Donnie. Says, hey, everybody. Good to see you, Donnie Does That. And Mogwai as well. Good to see you, Mogwai. Just don't feed him after midnight. Do appreciate you being here. And, This is intriguing because it was brought up. Not feeding Mogwais, in my personal opinion, because they never stayed after midnight or like that. It's pretty much, I'm going to agree, you have to agree, it's pretty much, it's indicated, not said explicitly, but it's indicated it's after midnight, before dawn. That from dawn to midnight you can feed them, but you cannot feed them after midnight and before dawn. It's pretty much understood. The latter half of the night, right. Okay.
Yeah, that and they probably stink like shit because it's a fuzzy animal and you can't wash it.
Sarcasm says, I've actually slipped over into Fusion, 21 Pilots, Falling in Reverse, stuff like that. I do enjoy 21 Pilots. I like some of their stuff. Plot Hole is in the house. He says, it says hello. It says, what is this, JL? It says, this is our retro episode. This is the retro. This is the retro intro, the retro outro, which I think you'll really, really dig. And of course, because we're talking about all retro movies, you know? And I was about to make a bad joke. I can't make that joke.
No, we can't talk about that.
No, we can't talk about that. I was about to make a bad joke. But it was funny as shit when you made it. It was actually your joke.
Yeah,
it was your joke, and I can't. It's a private joke.
People in the audience to know how terrible I am, but there are the new people that we need to.
This is true. This is very
gently
true.
And tenderly until they've settled in.
Travis Brown says Chuck Norris could have saved the Lizard Lounge from the pandemic. He could have, but unfortunately Walker did not do that. Oh man. Oh, let's see who else we got here tonight. Let me see. And Elizabeth Sylvester's in the house, another one of our amazing supporters. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Sylvester. Says, hi, Johnny. Hi, the Plot Hole. And, of course, hi to us. Plot Hole says, can't tell Jail from the creature of the Black Lagoon. It should be the beard, because he didn't have any hair. So, but I think I got everybody. I think I got everyone. And, yes, didn't miss anybody. So, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to all of our amazing patrons for hanging out with us. We do love it. We love seeing you in the chat. And, of course, your interactions with us, when we have our CTAs are fantastic. So, let's dive into it. The first big thing that I came across that I want to talk before we dive into our old school movies is that there's word on the wire that Jason Blum of Blumhouse and Anna is in the house. Another one of our oldest patrons is in the house. Good to see you, Anna. Thank you so much for being here. So I want to get your opinion. I want to get the live chat's opinion on this, because some people may not have heard about this. But Jason Blum from Blumhouse wants to purchase the rights from New Line and Paramount. Wants to purchase the rights for Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, because he wants to bring those franchises back, just like he's done with Halloween. He wants to bring, and he wants to do this specifically for Nightmare on Elm Street, because he wants to bring Robert Englund back for one more Friday the 13th, for one more Nightmare on Elm Street. He wants he wants that. I think he wants to give the franchise actual closure, and I get that, because Robert Englund hung up the glove years ago, and he said he's not going to do it again. And now Englund has said that he would do it again if and only if Freddy dies at the end permanently. Like, they put him down. Now, if Blumhouse buys the rights, they're going to want to do multiple movies, so they would have to find a way to kill Robert Englund's version and maybe bring back another version. I could see that. But what do you think? Given the 2010 remake, or given the 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, and the 2009 Friday the 13th that Michael Bay produced, do we think that it should be left alone? That just no? Or do you think, like with Halloween, Blumhouse could probably bring it back? What do you think?
I think that Nightmare didn't get closed well. That last movie, it had some good concepts in it, but the execution on it was piss poor. So, I mean, and Blumhouse is very hit or miss, too, is the thing with that. If they threw their best at it, I think it'd be great, but it's going to take some serious creativity, and they cannot half-ass it.
Right. Agreed. Sally Skellington is in the house. Good to see you, Sally Skellington. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Say hi to Jack for us. And, of course, Sally, you got to get us your shipping details. Get your shipping details to us at weekinhorror@gmail.com or via the Discord, because I have a Week in Horror pint glass I need to send you. That was gifted to you by, I think it was Travis Brown. Travis Brown won the pint glass last week, and we owe you a pint glass. So get us your shipping details, and I'll get that printed and sent out to you ASAP. So thank you for hanging with us, Sally. We do appreciate it. Plot Hole says, Blumhouse isn't paying that much for one Freddy film. Agreed. And then Annie says, wait, Freddy can die? Isn't he already dead? Technically a demon, an interdimensional demon. But he could technically be killed. Travis Brown says, after what happened with Halloween Kills, no way. Blumhouse should kiss my ass if he gets Freddy. Ooh. I could see why Travis would feel that way. I personally enjoyed Halloween Kills. I did. But I enjoyed Halloween Kills, and I'm going to suspend total judgment until Halloween Ends come out. But nonetheless, what Blumhouse did with Halloween, with the 2018 Halloween, I got behind that, and I really loved what they did with that. So I don't know.
Yeah, they kind of did a nice twist on it, and revealing the fact that he wasn't the only evil one around, and that people are more of a threat to each other than he is, but they did it without completely bastardizing him, which is the cardinal sin that most creators commit when they get a hold of another character, is they start changing them and they quote unquote make them their own, and don't.
Ivy Gifter says, I would kill to see Robert Englund's Freddy again, as would I. It gets to a point where they do get a little too old to play the role. Just like I'm pretty sure that Kane Hodder may be too old to play Jason again, but I would still kill to see Kane Hodder as Jason again. I would. I don't care that he's getting up there and he's still a big dude. He can still handle it. I would kill to see him as Freddy or as Jason one more time. So, Dib Dib is in the house. Good to see you, Dib Dib, with all thumbs up. Thank you so much, Dib Dib. Do appreciate it. And that reminds me, please smash that like button, because those like buttons interactions really, really help us. Plothole says Halloween Kills is garbage. The whole story makes zero sense. It made sense. It was coherent. I understood what was going on. There were some
Johnny hate. Oh my god.
oh my god. Ah! I understood what was happening in the plot. I get it. The problem is that you had characters in there who were making decidedly ridiculous choices. Like decidedly stupid decisions. But then again, it's in the story, it's essentially the effect is talking about mob mentality and how normally smart people do really, really dumb things when they become scared or they start acting in large groups. So that's the narrative behind it. That the thing that allows Michael to do what he does is because of the stupidity of people in large groups, of just mob mentality and panic.
And it's the legend of Michael Myers, because they use that gap in time where originally, he was a scary story, but he's grown over time. So it's that legend of him rather than the threat that he actually is that drives people to do this. So rather than trying to beef up his powers, make him supernatural or anything, they let the scary story do the work.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what plot hole brings up. It doesn't make sense. Why would this town get all mobbed up for this killer? The vast majority weren't there for it. Because what occurred in 1978 was literally put the town of Haddonfield on the map. It's all that Haddonfield is known for. They're not known for anything else. And a town's identity shouldn't be centered around a killer who murdered a bunch of people. And it's a part of the town's legacy. That is their legacy, is they're the town that Michael Myers came from. And so that's the problem. That's why when you talk about Michael Myers, it's like, that's the local. You go 50 miles to the next town outside of it, and they don't have that. But they talk about Haddonfield. Oh, Haddonfield, that's where those murders took place. That's the legacy that Michael left behind, and that's what the townspeople have to deal with. And so when all of a sudden Michael is free again and he's loose, people go up in arms and they freak out because the legend, it's the legend, it's true, and so and the further away the people who are involved in it, they know what Michael is. Jamie Lee Curtis's, Laurie Strode's character and Sheriff Brackett's character, they get it. They know he's just a person. So they're not affected by the people who weren't there, by the new generation. They look at it differently. It's actually compelling storytelling and how things are looked at differently from generation to generation.
Yeah, basically the legitimate boogeyman showed up.
Legitimate boogeyman,
under the bed. And
Travis Brown says, Johnny O's still angry at JL when his pick Damien won the bloodbath. It wasn't even my pick. It was random. It's on random. You're stupid. That's hilarious. Oh, And, there weren't giant plot holes in that. I just don't think that you liked the story. But, hey, but you didn't write it, so, but I get it. Oh, let me see. UKPI's in the house. Good to see UKPI. Says, I'm just a Halloween fanboy. I love remake after remake. Joshua Lee says, OWO, oh, whoa, Weekend Horror. Cindy also needs notice. Cindy? Did Cindy Sue pop in? Did I miss her? I missed Cindy Sue somewhere. Oh, Cindy Johnson. There he is. Cindy Johnson's in the house. Good to see you, Cindy Johnson. Thank you so much for being here. My apologies. I didn't miss you, Joshua. Oh, Joshua Lee, I said you at the very start because you technically were first. You were the very first comment. You were, I'm Peter Graves, and I. I called that at the very beginning. Ha-ha! Plotto says, I'm just trying to justify a shitty plot. I'm not trying to justify a shitty plot. It works, which is why I enjoyed the movie. I will call a shitty plot. You know me. I will call out a shitty plot. What does that look?
I mean, I like weird shit, so I'm not chiming in. Like, people are like, this sucked, and I'm like, that's why it's good.
And let's see. Plot hole. UKPI says plot hole. Step away from the Michael Myers. Just step away. And plot hole says, not to mention there was no supernatural elements alluded to, and then he's supernatural. They never said he was supernatural. They never said that, and it didn't end with him being supernatural. It ended with him getting the absolute torque, his absolute shit wrecked out of him. But then he still managed, because of their stupidity, because of their mob mentality, he was able to turn the tables on him. And that's because when people are getting knifed in front of you, the average Joe will tend to freeze up. Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry.
Johnny, if you wanted to get in on the conversation, maybe come on the fucking show instead of sitting in the chat.
Tony Regime says, Weekend Horror, but you'll also watch a shitty film 3 times. This is true. I will watch a shitty film 3 or more times. I absolutely will. I am a masochist like that. I am. Plottle says, no human being survives that at 70 years old and then walks away. Have you seen some 70-year-olds out there? Freaking beasts, dude. Just beasts. Yep. Shots fired. Cindy John says, I like how Johnny isn't even here and he's still in the bantering. I know, right? I know. That's all he does. He's here to just stir the pot. To stir it up. Oh, I appreciate... Sally Skeleton says, you guys are just fun to listen to, arguing about fun stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Sally Skeleton. Do appreciate that. And it says, JL is a movie whore. I'm absolutely a movie whore. I'm totally a movie whore.
A little bit of a movie slut, too. Don't necessarily need to pay.
That's right. You don't need to pay for it. I'm just movies.
Look a little interesting.
Sir Cab says, this week's tangent brought to you by The Plot Hole. Unpopular opinions for negative attention. Oh, the chat's turning on you, Johnny. It's turning. It's turning on you. All right, but yes, definitely let us know in the comments below as to what you think about Blumhouse potentially buying the rights to Nightmare on Elm Street so they could get another Robert Englund, one more Robert Englund turn at Freddy Krueger, and the rights to Friday the 13th from Paramount to see if they could bring back Jason as a possibility. Who knows where it will go, or who knows what will happen. Do you think this is like the best thing for the Nightmare on Elm Street series, or the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and the Friday the 13th franchise? Do you think it's the best thing to try and revitalize them, given the work that Blumhouse did with Halloween? Or do you think this is more like Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter and just, sending everybody up in arms? So definitely let us know. I want to hear what you think about it. weekinhorror@gmail.com or down in the comments below. Richard Meter says, my grandma used to say, if you're willing to stir the shit, you'd better be willing to lick the spoon. Damn straight. Oh, Tony Regime said, I'd rather see a Burning reboot or sequel. Oh, of The Burning? That's a Cropsy story. Interesting. That's kind of cool.
Maybe, yeah.
Interesting. All right, well, we got some movies to talk about. We're going to go way back in the Wayback Machine. So, Aaron, why don't you begin? What do we got first?
From June 28th, 1957, we have Beginning of the End.
And let's take a look at this trailer. I love old trailers.
witnessing the beginning of an era that'll mean the complete annihilation of man.
Annihilation?
The beginning of the end.
A menace so massive, so overwhelming, that thousands upon thousands are propelled into senseless terror. Panic takes the place of planned evacuation, and whole cities are paralyzed by fear.
The Air Force is standing by with an atom bomb. You can't drop an atom bomb on Chicago.
Yeah.
All right. Directed by Burt L. Gordon, written by Fred Freiberger and Lester Gorn, starring Peggy Castle, Peter Graves, Morris Ankrum, and Than Nguyen. And basically, it's just about a bunch of giant grasshoppers. They call them locusts, but they're grasshoppers, tearing the absolute shit out of a small town and then heading for Chicago.
Specifically, the South Side.
Haven't they seen enough?
I think there was some commentary there. I think they got a problem with the South Side, so just feed it to the locusts. that kind of biblical sensibility was not lost on me. It was like, okay, why is it locusts, which are decidedly biblical, and why is it the South Side of Chicago, which is a history entrenched in like crime and blood? It's like, oh, so we're just gonna feed it to the locusts. I get what they're saying.
Modern day Chicago, Bick, it's okay. They've all got guns.
Exactly.
They'll be fine.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is actually, like, I was impressed by this movie. I figured it was gonna be crap. The only thing that bugged me was the screeching of the grasshoppers, but
I see what you did there.
But yeah, they did a really good job with this. It's like, you can tell that there's a few differences because of the blur off the grasshoppers and everything, but they used something, it's kind of predecessor to blue screen. You could tell they put them against a neutral background and they did film overlay over film overlay, but they did a really good job because none of it's stop motion, none of it's anything along those lines. It's all live action blown up. I only saw one at the end where it was climbing the building and it was dead grasshopper. You could tell like they stuck a pin through there into the dead grasshopper so that they could pull the pin.
So pin put the back eggs.
This giant photo of a building.
I'm telling you, the one thing that got me was I was like, okay, because it's very, very obvious when we're watching it now, is you can see that they're grasshoppers and they're crawling up a picture. But I was like, oh crap. It's not just that it's a picture. That's a picture on a 3D object. Because there were shots of the grasshoppers up on the roof. And then coming over the side of it. I was like, oh shit. So essentially what they did is they had like, I would say they would do like a cardboard cutout. They would do like a wooden cutout of the building. Then they'd put a blown up image of the building on the wood as kind of like a back frame, so you get like this one picture that's held up by a frame, and that means the cockroaches, the grasshoppers can go over the top of it and look like they can crawl up on the roof. And I was like, oh, that was pretty slick. And I agree with this. And while yes, that was the big thing. And like what you bring up is that I also was actually rather impressed with this, considering this is 1956 when they shot this thing. And so I'm thinking, I was like, the reviews on this are that the special effects are absolutely atrocious. This is the reason why MST3K had a ball with this movie, and it's pretty much regarded as its effects were atrocious, but there's still something kind of compelling about the story, about the film in itself. I'm going back to it, but that's a contemporary look at kind of classic film. I'm thinking about this in the terms of watching it back in 1957, and I thought it was deeply impressive. At a time when there were movies coming out, when stop motion and animation were still things that they tried to interlace with real footage. Okay, and it was very, very obvious. At a time when they did this, they used all living creatures in this. So the trick photography in this, I thought, was very, very impressive for its time. And yes, you can tell they used the same grasshopper footage over and over again, like the grasshoppers walking across, the screen. And there were multiple layers of them. There's grasshoppers in the background, grasshoppers in the foreground, the grasshopper coming up out of the background to attack, and they used the same one from the woods footage as they did on the building footage. And I get that. I understand why they did that. Because that's just the way to go. That's just the technology at the time. But for the time, this was very well presented. And if I'm trying to imagine myself in a 1957 theater, Psycho isn't even out yet. And I'm thinking, and I'm watching this, it was like, this would be impressive. It was like, how did they do that? This is amazing. But they're cheap parlor tricks, compared to what we have today. But putting yourself in those seats, this thing has a lot of charm. The effects alone and the cool things that you can learn from this, like how they create the sets, how they interact with the animals, how they manage to pull stuff off, how they put the images of the close-up shots of the grasshoppers, that they lay them into the footage, especially the King Kong send up of the grasshopper crawling up and then coming through the window to get the girl. All of it, I thought was inspired and really, really smartly done.
Yeah, well, the forest ones, that was the one that impressed me the most, because you've got the soldiers out in the forest. When the grasshoppers come through, they're coming through at different layers behind some trees and in front of others, which means somebody sat there and went through each frame of that shot to cut the rear trees out, because if you just overlay film over film or film over the grasshoppers, they're all behind all of the trees. So that means they took a shot of the area without anybody in it. Then they brought the people through and they overlaid grasshoppers. Somebody went through frame by frame and cut out those trees so that when they laid the top footage over it, you had front trees, soldiers, grasshoppers, and then rear trees. And that is painstaking work. So, which is budget back then. I mean, man hours are some of the most expensive things. That's why they love CGI now, is because it reduces man hours. So I think that, like, with what they were working with, because you can tell this wasn't top budget. It was good budget. You can tell that by the actors they had in it, but with what they were working with, they did a damn good job of it.
I was really impressed. And who was it? Who somebody in the chat? Oh, and I see a couple new people who joined us. See, Diagnosis Horror's in the house. Another one of our amazing patrons. Thank you so much, Diagnosis Horror. Says, for some reason thought it was Tuesday. Shaking my head. That's okay. We're just getting started. So thank you so much, Diagnosis Horror, for being here. We do appreciate it. So the big thing on this one, and what I like, somebody in there I totally miss is that, oh yeah, it was Joshua Lee said, come on, people just went because it starred Peter Graves. And Peter Graves was a legend before he passed away. Unfortunately, I think he passed away in 2010, so he's been gone for a while. But people remember him from Airplane and the sequel Airplane 2, the sequel, Mission Impossible. He was the younger brother of James Arness of, I think, Gunsmoke fame. So, legendary actor. And I liked him in this. The acting in and of itself, I don't think was overblown. I think the performances from everybody in this, from Peggy Castle, from Morris Ankrum, I thought were all good. The big thing that got me on this one, and I don't think this is too much of a stretch. The movie came out in 1957. They obviously make references to dropping an atom bomb on Chicago in order to deal with the locust threat. And they were calling it the atom bomb because that's what was dropped in World War II. So the events of World War II are still fresh on people's minds. We're a little over 10 years past. So it's still there. And people still, remembering, the devastating effects of what those bombs did. So automatically, it's the most devastating weapon. The reaction is you absolutely cannot bomb Chicago to try and take care of this threat. We have to find another way. The big thing on this one is, and I love that it was so important. It was so integral to the plot, was that science, rationality, and reasonable thinking will always outweigh what I'm thinking that the movie was saying: government bureaucracy and military intelligence. That the movie in and of itself is not only a commentary on the perils and the strength of science in and of itself, but is a serious commentary on the military-industrial complex, because it's the MI complex that is the cause of the giant locusts, and it is the bureaucracy of the government and the military-industrial complex that results in the delayed assessment and dealing with the locusts, which allows them to invariably attack Chicago. And even then, they have the plan, they're about to enact it, and say, okay, well, we got to get going, because we got to get the locusts out of Chicago before they destroy everything. Now, we still got to wait for clearance. We still got to do everything by the book, which results in more damage, more death, and more destruction, until eventually, the government signs off on it, we're able to do it, and we finally end the threat. But not after untold, thousands are dead, and millions of destruction is wrought on the city of Chicago. I thought that this was a very, very subversive film for when it came out. And I went back and I watched this, and I watched the MST3K version. And the MST3K guys didn't really touch on this. There were some jokes about the time period, but I don't think they either didn't see or they didn't want to bring up the subversive nature of this film, which is why I think it didn't pop like it was supposed to, but because of what it was essentially saying about the country we live in.
Yeah, and it's, if you look at the time period for it, the atomic monsters using insects and other stuff where it's enlarged, I think it kind of started dwindling. I know it'd been playing out for a while, so they had to take kind of a new tack. The thing I thought was cool was that one of the protagonists, Audrey Ames, the female reporter, she's curious. She comes up to the government checkpoint and she doesn't, oh, okay, and go on her way like you normally expect. She questions it, and yeah, she negotiates with them for coverage on it, but at the same time, she pushes the people have a right to know, which was something that it's not a tack that you saw during World War II. It started growing with Korean War through that, and by the time the Vietnam War rolled around, you had the push of journalists against the government, what they're trying to do in secret, what the journalists are trying to show to people at home, and everything. And I think this was kind of one of the first revelations of that occurring. And then that, you're talking about the bureaucracy and stuff like that, and it's very portraying the officers as being self-serving, because the colonel just straight up tells them that they think I'm crazy, so I'm not going to report that, even though you've got a scientist here that works for something. I don't know if he worked for the Department of Agriculture. A government facility is straight up telling him, hey, I screwed up, and now we've got giant grasshoppers on the loose. And the guy he's like, we'll take a few hundred people, which seems big, except this is a swarm, and that's why they call them locusts, is it's supposed to be such a large group, even though you only see 4 or 5 at a time because of the effects budget. But yeah, it's definitely a different tack from what you saw at the beginning, which is where the civilians are dealing with it, and then the military swoops in and saves the day. This is like the civilians and the scientists saving the military from themselves.
That got me. And what I like that you brought up, what you brought up about Peggy Castle's character, Audrey Ames, the investigative journalist, how she, and I like this, 1957, a strong female character in a 1957 film who uses the same tactics we would, who uses like tactics we come to expect, like she's placating and she kind of like acquiesces to authority, but will circumvent and circumnavigate because she believes in her cause more. That governmental transparency is very important. We have to be aware of what we're doing as a country, and she gets that, and she follows that. She's willing to use the perceived weaknesses that the authority figures around her have of her in order to get and use those to her advantage. I like seeing a smart, strong female investigative journalist. I thought that was really, really good. One that's just not a prop for the hero entomologist to that he needs her as much as she needs him. And then of course both of them having to deal with the fact that ostensibly in this movie the government doesn't know what it's doing. One hand doesn't know what the other one is doing, and it's just like, and all this bureaucracy is getting in the way of American lives. And I see that, and you could see the kind of like, because what was it? This 1957, I think Korea had just kicked off. Because Korea, I think, if I remember my dates correctly.
I'm trying to remember. I know the Vietnam, we weren't in the war, but the struggle was starting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, sorry, 7 years in. So the Korean War effectively kicked off in 1950. So the Korean War's been going on for 7 years now, and obviously the situation in Korea is becoming untenable, or became untenable, and then it ended in 53. So this is 4 years after Korea. 4 years after Korea, the stuff about that is coming out, and then of course the Vietnam War. Just to make sure I don't want to just, in honor of our veterans, I want to make sure I get my dates right, was 1955. So that didn't end until 1975. It was 20 years we were in Vietnam. The Vietnam situation was going on. That war was going on. So Vietnam's already heating up, and it's already ugly. We're out of Korea by a few years, and already you see the underpinnings in film, especially science fiction horror films, of we have a problem that we need to address. And I felt that this film did that extraordinarily well. Another film that came along the following year, 1958, was The Blob. And while that one was depicted as kind of like the government response to that was also indicative of the government's bureaucracy and their lack of interdepartmental communication and their lack of transparency was something that we needed to be concerned about, which all of this echoes what Eisenhower was saying about the military-industrial complex, and beware the military-industrial complex. And these films really were kind of like cutting to the quick on that, which is why I think that people, the American public, the majority of them really didn't like that idea. That this kind of like anti-government, or this kind of like, putting the government in a negative light, didn't sit well with the American public, with the vast majority. But the small minority understood it, and that's what made them popular. It's why these films still have a life today. But now, and sadly, unfortunately, we laugh at them for their atrocious special effects, doing the best they could with what they had. But I want to make sure that we don't miss the point. And that's what struck me on this one. It was like, wow, they really went, they went for the gusto on this one, just giving the government the middle finger on this. I got to admit, I was impressed. And I see Thor Rasmussen has joined us. Good to see you. Thor Rasmussen's in the chat. Thank you so much for being here, bud.
Yeah, Audrey, when she goes to the scientist, it's Dr. Wainwright, Peter Graves' character. She tells him, when she talks about it, she's like, the police are looking at it as crime, and press, I think she calls it, basically just looking good. And she doesn't want military, she wants a scientist to look at it. So she wants an independent evaluation of it, which is the smartest thing she could do. And then you look at your audiences, because you're moving from the greatest generation being your viewers of the theater, who were very much pro-government, into the silent generation and getting towards their kids, and they were less in love with it. And it was their children that really became the hippies. But even then, they were not in love with the government, because the Korean War was perceived as mishandled, because we didn't pull out a victory. Technically, it is still going on. There's just a treaty that stops the struggle from spilling over the demilitarized zone. But yeah, definitely you can see the start of the departure from the pro-government, the army's going to save us route, because, yeah, they bring in the army. They've got a nuclear device ready, which I don't know why the hell you want to drop a nuclear device on creatures that are giant because of radiation, but that's their solution. And
especially when you bust out a friggin' Tommy gun and you're like, brrr, and they just drop. So
it's like, Jesus, are they made of stainless steel? What the hell?
Rodent LS name's in the house. Good to see you, Rodent LS name. Gabba Gabba to you, bud. Fantastic you being here. All right, UKPI says 50s, 60s horror was slow burn, 70s, 80s was bubblegum horror, 90s to aughts was gore. Now we're back to slow burn suspense. We are definitely more in the psychological horror style, the slow burn psychological horror. I think that plays very, very, that's pretty much the big thing now. And I have to say, 50s, 60s horror was kind of slow burn, but I think there was definitely more of a cultural bend to these things. Whereas nowadays, horror more reflects inward and tells stories about ourselves and about our internal experiences, and how different perspectives view the world differently, how they deal with situations differently, and the effects they have on our emotions and our minds. Whereas in this particular one, I think in the 50s and 60s, after the events of World War II, after the events of Korea, and of course, and Vietnam as well, that the idea that these ideologies were all about the separate, like the government and us are there's definitely a problem here, that we're being governed by people who are not telling us everything, and this separation between us was becoming very, very apparent. And a few people out there that had the access, had the ability to do these things, recognized that this was an untenable situation, that it was not sustaining, that eventually the government was going to do something that we didn't know about. It was going to get the U.S. into a lot of hot water, from a foreign perspective. And of course, a lot of people would argue that it happened with Korea and with Vietnam, and then of course leading on into the Middle East. So I know that war is not typically a thing, but these cultural effects on the genre, sci-fi and horror, are profound, because you're in adventure films, like action movies, Bridge Over River Kwai, you're going to get movies that glorify the American perspective on war. With dramas and romances and comedies, you're going to get things that allow us to kind of like see these terrible things and go, and breathe a sigh of relief, because we see the happier, kinder stories, or we laugh at them because they're enjoyable. But a movie, sci-fi, science fiction, and horror allow us to deal with the cultural ramifications of what we're doing in the world, and look at them from an exaggerated perspective, and internalize them and understand them a little bit better. And I dug this, and I thought of it was the movie is stronger than things like, well, I love MST3K. The films like this are stronger than like MST3K would lead you to believe. So I would recommend, knowing what we know, go back and watch the movie again. Watch it again and get a good sense of what was going on around the filmmakers at the time. And you'll begin to see those little subversive elements that really make the film a lot deeper than just Chicago takes on giant grasshoppers. As goofy as that sounds, when reviewer Bill Warren said that the movie was, the special effects were atrocious, but there's something compellingly watchable about this goofy little movie, to quote him. And yes, that compellingly watchable aspect is what it says about us. And that's what I caught when I was watching this, when I went back and watched this one. I thought, it's like, it kind of rung a bell for me. I was like, damn. And kudos to Burt Gordon and Fred Frellberger for really going out on a limb there.
Yeah, it was horror. Sci-fi is all about timeless concepts that you dress up in futuristic clothing. Horror is all about what's going on at the current moment, and it goes through waves because it's about overindulgence. It's like you get those chips you crave, and you eat them till you're sick, and you don't look at them again for 10 years. So that tends to be horror, and that's why it moves through waves more.
Right.
All right, but our CTA, what we want to know this week, and you can email us at weekinhorror@gmail.com. Give Alex some reading material, drop it in the comments or in the live chat. What is your favorite 50s creature feature?
Oh, so many good ones. So many good 50s creatures.
Of course.
Eco horror is always so much fun. I have to admit, my favorite 50s creature feature is always going to be the Blob. What they did with that movie, the original Steve McQueen, what they did with that one was like the movie theater, doing that scene. There's sequences like that I was like, holy crap. And that movie would have scared the shit out of me were I in the 50s watching it. Just like in 1988 when the remake came out, that movie was that scared me. There were some scary moments in that. Some really solid effects that got me. I loved it. I absolutely loved what they the Blob. I'll always love the original Steve McQueen one. What about you?
My favorite, God, I always like the corny ones on those, because Night of the Lepus I always joke about, but the Killer Shrews will always have a place in my heart simply for the fact that, like, the shrews come on screen and you're like, that's a dog. That's a dog in cardboard. It's like, all right, I'm down. Let's do this.
Another good one was Day of the Triffids. Day of the Triffids was a good one as well. The plant thing, the weird plant aliens. I really dug those. Let's see, here in the live chat we've got, let me see, let me scroll back up. And, thank you, Sir Cavs. Sir Cavs says, I like the Inside Jail. I never would have picked that on my own. It's interesting stuff to go back and look at it through the lens of what we know now. I really dug that one. Wrote in a last name brings up Black Lagoon, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Sarcasm says Them. Oh, Them was a good one. Yes, giant ants. Dig that. Absolutely. Diagnosis Horror says It's a Wonderful Life. Travis Brown says Invaders from Mars. Very nice. Excellent. Ranger Rivera says Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's a fun one. Let me see. Jinju says Island of the Killer Shrews. I could just wanted just the Killer Shrews, right?
I think so. They release these things under tons of names, though.
Right.
Because we've had a couple tonight that got re-releases, I think.
NA says The Thing, but technically, that would be the Thing from Outer Space.
Yeah.
Which was the Howard Hawks film. Yeah, the Howard Hawks film, which was then technically remade by John Carpenter as The Thing. But that would be The Thing from Outer Space. But good call. Excellent call there. And Ivy Gantry says, love Night of the Triffids. Oh, yeah. Triffids were amazing. Absolutely. Oh, and what was this? Ivy Gantry says, Frogs, just because my son loved it so much. Well, Frogs was the 70s. Frogs, I believe, was 73 and had Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott without his amazing mustache, but still kicking ass. When a shirtless Sam Elliott with no mustache takes out an alligator with an oar, that's the kind of movie I'm looking for. I'm going to have to clip that line. I'm going to have to clip this line. I'm going to make a note of that. That's for the next trailer. 51, 12. I'm going to mark that down. I got to start finding, because I got to find new lines for us for the new trailer. All right. Think from Another World. Think from Another World. Thank you, Rodin Ellis. Think from Another World. That's it. Absolutely. All right. So, our next movie is came out June 29th. We're going even further back, 1945, and it is Jungle Captive. Let's take a look at this trailer. Pow. I love these Out of the Shadows.
Wait a minute. I gotta check with the police first.
Police?
Yeah, it's the law.
I love Rondo Hatton. So amazing.
They've got those awards, Empire Series awards named after him.
Where are you keeping the Ape Woman?
Right over here. You want to see her?
Yeah.
It's Fred.
Now, please let me out of here.
Anne, I need you.
What do you mean?
I need your blood.
Oh, classic trailer. I fucking love classic trailers. So yes, that was Jungle Captive, 1945 horror film. And the film directed by Harold Young, written by Dwight V. Babcock and M. Coates Webster, starring Otto Kruger, Emelita Ward, Phil Brown, Vicky Lane as the Jungle Captive, and of course Rondo Hatton as Moloch, the legendary Rondo Hatton, who is his unique facial features due to I think he had acromegaly, which allowed him to play lots of villains and monsters. The film is the third in the Jungle Woman franchise, the Captive Wild Woman franchise by Universal. The first film was Captive Wild Woman, released in 1943. The second one was Jungle Woman in 44. And this was the conclusion of that trilogy, 45, Jungle Captive. And the film picks up immediately after the events of the second film, after Jungle Woman, in which the Ape Woman is currently on ice, having been killed at the end of the second film, and an evil doctor has come to bring her back because he specializes in bringing things back from the dead, and he wants to revitalize her and see if he can turn her back into a human. So, evil science meets evil science, and of course, as Eugene would say, shit gets real. Or as real as everybody just getting strangled, because that's pretty much what happens in these movies. Everyone just gets strangled to death. But a lot of fun. But and I'll have to admit, this one gets, this particular film does not get a lot of love. The first one, Captive Wild Woman, got a lot more love. They came out in 43. But the biggest thing about this film, I think, is the fact this is an example of fast and diminishing returns, is because The first one came out in 43, the second one came out in 44, and the third one came out in 45. They actually cast different actors. Vicky Lane was not the one who originated the part, so you have new faces playing the parts, playing the different roles. And the problem is that it's the change is too quick, and the previous films are too fresh on people's minds. If more time had been allowed to go by, maybe 2 or 3 years before they dropped the sequel, it may have been better fare. But unfortunately, it's just too much too quick. It was like, oh, we're doing it again, oh, we're doing it again, and unfortunately, audiences just weren't really having it. And you can tell because this one was decidedly less budgeted than the previous films, and the plot is pretty threadbare, it's pretty simplistic, and not a lot really went into it. The acting is decent. I thought Vicky Lane was actually quite good, and of course Otto Kruger as well. But then I always love Hatton. I always love Rondo Hatton and his roles, and Amelita Ward was absolutely serviceable. But nonetheless, unfortunately, too much too quick. And when you're changing actors and reducing your budget in the long run, you're not going to get what you're expecting for. So I think this was just, they had 3 films. They just needed to get them done and get them out of the way. And unfortunately, what could have been a compelling story, an interesting story of like evil science meets evil science, just turned into a Frankenstein rip that just didn't play with audiences.
Yeah, it's far enough into the Universal monsters, because this is they break down, I always forget the classification, Universal monsters into the originals, and then you've got like classics and so forth and so on, and they refine it more and more till when you get to the end, you've got it down to like Creature of the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Frankenstein, etc. This one didn't survive the cut for those, but it was part of the Universal Monsters run.
Mm-hmm.
And they built this idea, I think, of taking these creatures and theming movies around them. And, you talk about diminishing returns, but I also think they had a sense from the very beginning that this wasn't going to play out as a classic. So they were, rather than trying to spin it or trying to allow that time in between, instead of thinking that it would have made it deeper, I think they figured it would have diminished the popularity even more. So they were trying to spin it out before it died. And either way, you can see that they're having trouble each time reusing that character, because by the time you're on this third one, she might as well be a prop. She doesn't have lines. She barely walks. It's everything happening around her till it's not really about the creature that it's advertised upon.
Right, yeah, it barely it's like literally in those final moments when it gets up, and then only to be put down again. After the gunshots, all of a sudden kind of like reawaken, revert her back into her primal state. It's just, like I said, just trying to do something quick and trying to do something fast was a bummer, considering Captive Wild Woman was so strong. Because after watching this, I was like, well, what am I missing here? I had to go back and watch the first 2 films, and I was like, wow, they started really, really good. I liked what they did with that. But unfortunately, this is what happens when you move too fast, too quick. And also, considering this was 1945 when this came out, they're dealing with the production code, the Hays Code, is problematic, especially when you're dealing with evil scientists doing things to women. The very first film, the first one, Captive Wild Woman, was hit. The original script was hit by the production code really, really badly, because the idea of taking a brain and putting it into an animal, taking an animal, putting it into a human, was problematic. And the studio had a really, really big, or Universal had a problem with that because of I would say the censors did, because they didn't want to cross those lines of like the human soul. They didn't want to offend the religious groups out there by insinuating that a human soul could be put into an animal, or vice versa in that respect. And so they turned it from a partial brain transplant instead of a full brain transplant. So little kind of the things that are innocuous to us now is like, that's just goofy and silly because we know better. But back then, this was a major thing. And so there were small changes made to it that kind of like reduced the effectiveness of it, because the film wants to be exploitative. The evil scientist utilizing the woman to his advantage, taking out her brain, replacing her, turning into an animal woman. And of course, yes, this bridges the kind of like treads into the bestiality territory especially in the second film, where people were kind of like, people kind of weirded out by that. Oh, it's a human-animal hybrid, and then, and so unfortunately the Hays Code, what could have been a pretty strong story, which, Isle of Dr. Moreau style, unfortunately gets hampered by the public sphere, or what the production code censors believed would be too egregious for public consumption. And so you try to make an exploitative movie, it's reduced by the censor, and then you try to wiggle your way around that, and then you try to do sequel after sequel, because Universal was big on the sequels, as evidenced by Dracula, as evidenced by Frankenstein, Wolfman. We got to get them out there, and unfortunately, diminishing returns. It just, you can't. You've got to allow time for it to bake into the culture before you just drop another one on people's faces. That was kind of a bummer. And in this third film, it shows. Super, super cheap. Although the actors tried to do their best to save it, unfortunately, the backing was just not there. The money wasn't there. The support wasn't there. You can tell that, man, this is what I loved. And this is the one positive thing I can take away from this, is that nowadays, if a studio is not really backing a film, nobody really has the investment to make a good product. You can tell when the director's lazy. You can tell when the actors are phoning it in. These things become very apparent. When the script is threadbare and whatever like that. The new Halo series is a good example of this. When pretty much it's like nobody cares about this thing. The big thing is that back in these days, because the contract situation with studios, people were contracted to films, to a block of movies. Directors and actors were commodities that were traded and used like baseball teams back then. Back in the kind of like the golden era of Hollywood. And the problem is that, and the saving grace of this is that the director and the actors are still doing everything they can to tell a compelling story. We're making a movie. This is a big thing. We're still going to try and tell as compelling a story and as interesting a story and well-acted a story as possible, despite the fact that the studio's not giving us really any support on this. But it also makes it all the more heartbreaking.
Yeah, they're already pushing the suspension of disbelief on this with the idea that a brain transplant's going to cause a woman to sprout hair and everything, and physically morph. And when they start doing a half brain and they push it, it really does damage to, especially in light of what we demand today. Back then, I think the marvel of the theater itself was enough to kind of push people into that zone a little more. But now looking back, the plot would never satisfy. Yeah. But even with this kind of, the whole plot line feels almost random. Yeah, it's a logical series of events, but why has this been paired with this specific universal monster and everything? Even with all of that going on, everyone does their best at their part. I mean, you can tell that they put the sets together well. The props are good quality. It's not at all like a D quality movie. They put in everything that they should have, but they got manure to work with and nothing grew from it, basically.
Right. Yeah, and it was, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was Betty Bryant was originally signed to come in and was chosen for the role, chosen for the female lead in this, and unfortunately, she had problems. She had a child. She was trying not to spend too much time away from her family. She wound up, these are kind of the problems that came along with it. She wound up getting dropped after like the first day of shooting because she came in unprepared, and the second day she was like 40 minutes late. So they dumped her, and they quickly brought in Amelita Ward, which is why, and you could see when Amelita Ward came in, she doesn't have a ton to work with. It's just because production's already begun. We've just lost our lead actress. We got to bring in someone on the fly. So she came in. She did well. I thought Amelita Ward was a fair, like I said, very, very serviceable. She did better in films like, Gangway for Tomorrow. I think it was the Falcon in Danger. And people may know her. She was often credited as lead award. But ultimately, the film itself, I don't think anybody behind the scenes had any kind of faith in this thing. They were just trying to get the story done and get it told and just kind of put it out there. And just so they could be done with it. I think it was, and what ultimately could have been interesting, because Cheela the Ape Woman was meant to be one of the Universal monsters up there with Wolfman and Dracula and Creatures of the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein and the Mummy and Invisible Man. It was supposed to be up there. The science run amok creation, and unfortunately, I think in my eyes, the reason we don't hear about it all that often was because of the Hays Code. The Hays Code, I think, in their eyes, in the production code, this went too far. That the Invisible Man is because in this one, it's the Invisible Man playing with science, turning himself invisible and going crazy. It's Frankenstein's monster is like they're dead, and then they bring it back. It's like it's the light, brought back to life via the horror, the evil like electricity and stuff. But in this particular one, it's blending the line between animals and humans, which is why when the Isle of Dr. Moreau, when that came out, that novel incensed the public because of the idea that humans and animals could be crossed like that, and the idea that these lines could be blurred. And so people had a problem with that because, at the time, the mentality was that there was a big thing that separates humans from animals, that we are special, and, and animals are definitely a lower tier below us. That mentality was pervasive. And when we make movies or tell stories about how it's not so, how we side with the science, and it's not really like that, that we can tell these stories that are kind of grounded in a modicum of reality, that scared people. That was like teaching at the time. It was like teaching evolution in school, and it freaked people out. So, and I think this one attempted to push the captive wild woman, that Cheela the Ape Woman attempted to push barriers and to really, really make something interesting and unique. And unfortunately, our own kind of puritanical sensibilities kind of tanked it, which was sad, which is kind of a bummer because it was new, it was inventive, it was trying to take a concept that had only been kind of like written about and really bring it to the big screen, and people just weren't ready for it. At least the people behind the production code weren't ready for it, and ultimately kind of tanked it, which is where I think is what was going on behind the scenes.
Well, you also have a conflict there too with, you don't have a lot of, in fact, if you look to the big names in Universal Monsters, you can only name one female, the Bride of Frankenstein, Elsa Lanchester. But with this one, it would have been nice to have more, but just like you said, bestiality, there's a certain requisite sexiness that was expected of female stars back then, and a specific ideal they had to fit into. And you can see they did that when she's in her human form. The posters are very explicit about it because she's in almost like a swimsuit top.
Almost a Tarzan, almost like a Tarzan kind of feel, yeah.
Yeah, and it just, that conflicts completely with the fact that she turns into this giant ape. So that only pushes the whole bestiality human-animal conflict even further, and I think it kicks it out of people's comfort zone.
Right. But I think is one of the things about this one. I think I would recommend going back and watching Captive Wild Woman for everybody. If you want to see the entire trilogy, definitely jump on it so you can get the entire story from beginning to end. But the most important is the first one is Captive Wild Woman, and what Universal was attempting to do with that movie. You can see the effects of the production code on the film. You can see what they were striving to do, and you can see it as kind of a great example of innovative, or I would say boundary-pushing filmmaking under the thumb of the censor. And I like that. It was a kind of a hallmark film, and we missed out on what could have been a fantastic Universal monster. And then, of course, you just see the diminishing returns of the rest of the franchise as it goes further and faster, trying to get these movies out. And I think you can stick with the first one. Definitely check out the trilogy if you get the opportunity. But yeah, I think it was too much. But ultimately, that's what horror is supposed to do. It's supposed to drive us to these things. And yeah, if the movie comes out, it makes people or audiences look up at the screen and go, "Huh, I didn't know that about myself." That's what it's supposed to do. It's like, I'm sorry you don't like what you didn't know about yourself. I'll have to admit, Cheela the Ape Woman in this third one, when she pops up, I was like, huh, they did pretty. It's kind of a sexy ape woman. Got kind of a Fairuza Balk kind of thing in Island of Dr. Moreau kind of thing going on. But nonetheless, I get why people weren't ready for that. But that's the element. That's the essence. That's the essence of horror. And the essence, I think, what people missed. It was a little too ahead of its time. Unfortunately, I don't think that this film could really be remade. We know too much, like Nicodemus said in The Rats of Nim. We can't go back to the way we were because we know too much. But unfortunately, I think this is it was kind of groundbreaking in the beginning. So definitely check it out if you get the opportunity. But this kind of led me because each led me to a question I want to ask the audience, because each film has something to offer. Each one has a little something to offer as far as film history goes, as far as like filmmaking goes, the transformation effects, which I thought were quite decent, given the experience, with Lon Chaney and the Wolfman, and of course, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Phantom of the Opera. What is your favorite of the Cheela Ape Woman franchises? Which one? The first one, the second one, or the third one? I can tell you, my favorite is the first one. What about you, Aaron? What's your favorite of the three?
I haven't seen the first two. This is the only one I've seen, and I'm going to say any of them but this one.
But this one? But my favorite is the first one, is Captive Wild Woman. While the other two do have some things that we can applaud, my favorite's the first. But what is your favorite of the three Cheela the Ape Woman, the Cheela the Ape Woman franchise? Let us know in the comments below or at weekinhorror@gmail.com. And you're right, Ivy Gentry, a furry positive movie. Damn straight. It actually it was. All right, so let's jump to I think arguably the most amazing film of tonight. We're gonna have this was a great one. Aaron, take it away. What do we got next?
Definitely the most interesting one way or another. From June 30th, 1964, The Monster of the Opera. Roll the trailer.
L'orgie des vampires. L'aventure la plus extraordinaire écrite sur la réincarnation d'un homme. D'un homme trahi par une femme. Ouais, cette fois-ci, moi je serai contre toi. L'orgie des vampires. Du fantastique à la terreur. Vous en allez, croyez-moi, avant que les portes de ce théâtre ne se ferment à jamais. Dans une ambiance de folie, de sexe et de désir.
Moi, je couche avec toi.
Lily. Lily, comment peux-tu être aussi cynique?
J'aime faire l'amour. Non, je ne ferai jamais. Laisse-la, Lily.
Un film plein d'audace. Lily belle et perverse. Dévorez-la, rendez-lui.
Laissez-moi. Laissez-moi, je vous en prie.
Ne manquez pas de voir le plus envoûtant des films terreur sexe, l'orgie des vampires. Un film de mystère, de magie, d'érotisme. Vous viendrez voir l'orgie des vampires.
So amazing, you don't even need subtitles to understand what's going on.
So this is an Italian film directed by Renato Poselli, written by Renato Poselli and Esto Gastaldi, and Giuseppe Pellegrini, starring Marco Mariani, Giuseppe Adobati, Barbara Haywards, and Alberto Arcetti. And essentially, it is a movie about a troupe of performers, primarily dancers, that move into a theater haunted by a vampire. And the vampire is set on claiming one of the women. So it's Dracula meets Phantom of the Opera. And the Italian name is Orgy of the Vampire. And I was disappointed after I translated that and then watched the movie.
Well, actually, that was the French title, wasn't it? I
thought it was French, but I looked it up, and they're very similar. I'd have to roll it back.
Because I thought the Italian one is Il Mostro dell'Opera.
Is it? Okay, because, yeah, if you translate the Orgy of the Vampire. Either way, it's very close. But yeah, I know the film was clipped together. You can tell that by the varying grades of film when you watch it. So it may have gotten a French intro reel and then ended up with English subtitles. Who knows?
Oh man, this particular one, I have to admit, I think this one is going to be a guilty pleasure for me, and for a number of reasons. And I will, and above all, the big, despite what you see on screen is actually kind of impressive, despite the fact that the film had a really troubled production. The big takeaways in this is, number one, I love Giuseppe Autobatti's performance as Stefano the Vampire. I thought he took, because obviously this was 1964. It was 1964. So already we have Bela Lugosi is the big name on campus. All right, as far as like Dracula's go, kind of set the bar for depicting vampires. What I liked on this one is you can see elements, because this is an Italian, because Giuseppe was known for essentially the spaghetti westerns he did, and a number of other dramas and comedies that he was a part of. But this particular one, he got to play the vampire Stefano with just beautiful gusto. You could see elements of Lugosi in his performance, and you could see the actors today that took inspiration from Giuseppe's performance. The whole idea of the mugging for the camera with the huge fangs, and then the big. You can see the Hammer horror what influenced Hammer horror, Christopher Lee's depiction of Dracula as well. Not to mention the things we have today. I loved the depiction of this. I thought he approached it with zeal. You could tell he loved playing the part, and that's what I love actors who really love the monsters they play. That's a good takeaway. And of course the production values. I thought the theater was fantastic. I thought there was great production value going on, especially for the time period. But ultimately, Sarcasm says, and now it's time for everyone's favorite segment where JL polishes the turd. The movie in itself is not terrible. The movie is enjoyable. It did have a very troubled production. So this was produced by Rossano Brasi's brother, Oscar Brasi, and it actually started shooting in 1961. But because of extreme budget issues, it wasn't completed until 1964. And it was initially, the problem with this, and the real big issue with this, is that if you watch this movie, if you watch this one on just straight away, the problem is that the movie was originally envisioned as a sequel to Polselli's 1960 horror film, The Vampire and the Ballerina, and hence why it's the working title Il Vampiro dell'Opera. The problem is that Italian audiences were getting really tired of vampire films. Vampires were the big thing, thank you Bela Lugosi, and thank you Universal, and so people wanted to make vampire movies, but the Italian audiences were getting a little, they're kind of like us with Marvel films today. Were getting a little worn out. They wanted something new, America's getting so much. England and Germany and France are putting on all this interesting stuff. Why do we get stuck with all the old school things? And I dug that, but unfortunately, what they did was they envisioned a sequel to The Vampire and the Ballerina, and there are references in this movie to that first film because there were sections that just couldn't be changed. That's why you get the weirdness of the film stocks within the film itself, which is why it feels like almost two films cobbled together. So there's links back to the original film, which will be weird if you don't get it, more specifically Stefano's story. But nonetheless, I think that this particular one stands well on its own, despite the problems with the money behind it, and despite it going through numerous hands trying to get this production done. But I will say, because I fucking cracked up. I don't know if you did. The way this movie kicks off is so utterly ridiculous, and it is. I was watching. I was like, "What?" I was literally like, "She walks in." The movie opens up, and she's running from our performer is running from Stefano the vampire, and she's running through like the castle. And she's doing her movements are extremely exaggerated, extremely fluid. And I'm like, why is she performing like this? And she's doing like classic, she's doing like theater falls, and it's very, and everything is embellished. And then there's all the back and forth, and it was like, this is extremely weird. And then the Van Helsing character comes up, and what was the weirdest part, I fucking laughed out loud, was when the Van Helsing character runs up. When he runs up and goes to like save her, and they do like the hands thing, like this, and I was like, "What the hell is going? What am I watching? This is absolutely absurd." But then I realized, then it's the reveal she was having a dream, because then she runs away and she runs out of the castle and runs down into this river, into like this creek, and then like lays on the rock like you would see in ballet, like lays on the rock, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" She was dreaming. She herself is a professional dancer. So she was dreaming of herself. I get it now. I understand it. Going back, Josh Lee says Aaron is not amused. This cracked me up. I thought this was hilarious. But it's one of those things that is weird, because if you don't know about the first movie, that's what kind of said, and I found out reading into it, or looking into this one, the history of it, that's the problem audiences had with this. Is because it opens up with a sequence that you need to be aware of the first film so that you understand what the hell is going on in this movie, so you can understand Stefano's story and Stefano's connection to the theater, or technically to the opera, and the dancers that are involved in this, and then all the weird pseudo-lesbian stuff that's going on in the film. It's like, this is so fucking strange, unless you've seen the first movie. That's invariably what hurt this one. Because it was marketed as the monster of the opera. So people had this idea that it was like Phantom. But nope, just another vampire picture. So that's kind of what hurt this one in the long run. But nonetheless, a funny fucking movie. It had some funny ass moments in it. It was just fantastic. 50s lesbians, or the way they're depicted, 50s Italian lesbians, are just, it would just beyond funny.
Well, the movie... What kills me is it bounces between having very artistic, intellectual sections, and then trying to be a very grounded horror. So you'll have like, I kind of figured out that it was a dream just because of the background when it was going on at first. I was cool with that, and then the fucking pitchfork came out, and I'm like, what is going on with this pitchfork? And he keeps using it, and I'm like, that thing is ineffective at killing, and you're a vampire, dude. Why do you have a pitchfork? And unless that's something from the first movie, I got no idea.
And the fact that it's very obvious the pitchfork is cut in such a way that it can be utilized to such effect.
Accidentally kill an actress. Yeah.
Which I think was, unfortunately, really, really obvious.
Yeah, and then the guy hits it, and I'm like, and he says, I can't get to him, and I'm like, psychic powers, I guess. But then it goes on, and those same elements play out again, where he's forcing them to dance, and it's like, he's never shown this power before. He doesn't do it again. They're striking this invisible wall, which I guess is an ode to the mime, and this is very theatrically centered and demonstrating theatrical arts of the people that are in it. And the fact that it's Italian cinema kind of says something to me, because Italian cinema's always had kind of, they include things symbologically. Is that a word? Symbolically.
The word you're looking for is, what's the symbology?
It is now. But
what is the symbolism? I think the word you're looking for is symbolism.
Yeah, they include that in a lot of their cinema, and that plays out here. But like I said, they try to go for this the vampire is dangerous because of the typical vampire threat. But then again, he takes, and anytime there's a vampire attack, be it him or the brides, he's kind of got chained up down in this secret area that's not actually there. Anytime there's a bite, there's never blood, and they're just sucking on their neck. And I'm like, I guess it's pseudo-eroticism, but I'm like, when does this damn orgy start? And it never starts.
Never gets to it.
No. I'm like, there's got to be at least 30 minutes of this thing missing. But it's not a bad movie. It will keep you entertained the entire time through, except for the one part that lost me, because I started this one night and finished it the next day, because when the landlord is like, this place is deadly, it's cursed, people disappear, and he just like da 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 off into the background, and I'm like, all right, This guy's an asshole, and I can't deal with this tonight. I'll pick it up tomorrow. But yeah, no. Once I got into it and it started from there. It's not a bad movie.
The action sequences were quite well done. I enjoyed, like I said, I really loved Giuseppe's performance. He took a lot of inspiration because Christopher Lee's Dracula was a big, big hit in Italy when it came out, and people loved. They just jumped on the way he approached the role of Dracula. They love Italian audiences ate up Hammer horror, and so I think Giuseppe took inspiration from him, and then you can see how his performance influenced generations beyond that. And of course, there's some Bela Lugosi in there as well. But ultimately, I think it's the action pieces, and of course the whole sequence where they're down there in the basement and they're going after the vampire. And of course, yes, the pitchfork is just goofy as shit. But I like what they did with this. They had a lot of fun with it. And nonetheless, it's enough so that you can set aside the very, very problematic aspects of the film. And of course, if you dig the kind of titillating, the idea of putting women necking on film, scantily clad for the time period, scantily clad woman necking on film. That whole sequence where like the three girls are together. I can tell you honestly, straight up, nothing happens beyond what you saw in the trailer. There's nothing like extravagant. There's nothing like, oh goodness, they put this now. They go right up to the edge. They don't go over. But that's kind of the fun. It's fun and it's innocent and fun. And I really, really enjoyed what they were trying to convey in this one. But what really sells the movie is Giuseppe's performance. It's inspired. He's having fun with it, and that's really what we hope. What we hope from the actors who play our monsters is that they're enjoying it, that they love it, that he got to do something that he didn't normally do. Get to step out of his comfort zone and really have some fun with it in a very theatrical way. And I think that's ultimately what kind of saves the movie. I see that someone new. Where is she? Where is she? Sarah Velez popped in. Good to see you, Sarah Velez. You're not late. A wizard is never late, nor is she early. She arrives precisely when she means to. Good to see you, Sarah. Thanks so much for being here. And Josh Lee says, so we were blue-balled. Gotcha. I wouldn't say it was to that extent. But I said.
I know exactly what it reminds me of. It's Dracula meets beach blanket bingo. Is exactly what it is, because they're running around dancing, playing, and getting randomly attacked by this vampire.
And even the ending of it, when they confront, even though nothing extreme, like you said, like nothing extremely violent even takes place in this for a vampire film. There's no blood in it, and even when they defeat Stefano at the end, when they just basically surround him with the torches, and I kind of dug. I was like, wow, that was fairly effective for a death scene, even though it's a cutaway and cut back. There's no real like trick photography done in this particular one. But I dug it. It looked good for what it was. So remember, going back and watching this particular one, it really, really helps if you've seen The Vampire and the Ballerina, it came out in 1960, which actually, in my opinion, was a far superior film. And it will give you some plot elements that play in this proposed sequel that all of a sudden they kind of like switched up to try and sell it to audiences, to kind of slip it in there so people would watch it. But ultimately, a serviceable vampire film. There's just some ridiculousness. The dance sequences are kind of very Austin Powers. I just kept getting that vibe. I kept getting that 60s vibe of like the Austin Powers cutaways. It was like and just like interpretive dance all over the place, which but nonetheless, it gets the job done. It really, really does. Oh, Ordinary Jeff is in the house. Good to see Ordinary Jeff. Says, I'm later than usual. Had to stop at Wrecking Yard for a car horn to wire to 2 9-volt batteries to booby-trap coworker's desk. If that is not the best reason I've heard to be late, I don't know what is. So more power to you. You see what I did there?
And it's nicer than putting an airbag in their desk.
That would be hilarious. Rodent Alice Man says, Dracula meets the 5,000 fingers of Dr. T? That's an intriguing concept. That is a very intriguing concept. Oh, but nonetheless. Oh, thank you, Sir Kaz. This is legit, though. Jail's doing a great job with this one. I'm almost convinced to give it another try. I would say if you do, definitely check out The Vampire and the Ballerina first. Give that one a look before you watch this one. That way you can get those. That way, when this one opens up, when you watch Monster of the Opera, when this one opens up, it'll make a little bit more sense. You get a better sense of what's going on in the film in the film in and of itself. So, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah,
the-
but ultimately, yeah, the film is, this is a demonstration of the kind of the pitfalls of recycling ideas, which is one of the things that kind of hampered Italian film during that time. Is one of the points I wanted to touch on, was that you'll see a lot of recycled elements that kind of went into this to kind of force it and kind of get the movie done, but also was a problem in all of Italian cinema, because unfortunately, Italian cinema was racing to catch up with everybody else, and was kind of getting the leavings. They weren't super, I would say Sergio Leone did the best in depicting the Old West, using Italy to depict the Old West in the spaghetti westerns. It was able to shoot really effective Western films on a fairly cheap budget, without having to come to the States to do it. I thought that was innovative. But as far as that, Italy was often left behind, and so they were left picking up everybody's scraps until like the likes of Argento and Fulci and the others came along to really reinvent the horror genre, to make it say, well, let's just do what they're doing, but let's do it extreme. Let's bring the real extreme to it. And they're the ones that really brought it. But before that, unfortunately, this is kind of like what you got in Italy.
Yeah, they're just trying to fill a slot in the market. Nobody was really hyper passionate about it, I don't think.
Right.
But the question we have for you is, what is your favorite classic monster? You can email us at weekinhorror@gmail.com. Let us know in the comments or in the live chat.
My favorite classic monster is always going to be Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yep, mine too. Just
Always
because, like, he's the good guy. Like, he was chilling,
Right?
and they came and fucked with him.
He just wanted to swim around and do his thing.
Yeah. Well, he took their woman, and I'm like, hell, he'll probably be nicer to her than they would. The finest of fish.
Because a fish man. There is no misogyny with a fish man. Oh, I got some love. Angel Rivera brings up Bela Lugosi's Dracula, the original classic Dracula. Got that. Tony Regime's 50-foot woman. I think I know why you like the 50-foot woman and what it entails.
Climbing gear and a scuba mask.
All right. Let's jump on. Oh, yes, Aravella says, ooh, my favorite classic thing was the creature from The Thing. Shape-shifting monsters, always a lot of fun. All right, so we're going to go back, because we went forward to 1964 for the last film. Now we're going to go back to 1958, specifically July 1st, 1958, and Universal, or this is AIP's How to Make a Monster. Let's take a look at this trailer.
Hidden within each of us is a secret desire to destroy. Each of us would like to be able to become the other being, to know the master makeup artist's magic. How to Make a Monster. Broadway stellar performer Robert H. Harris brings to this theater the most terrifying of men, a man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
I'll use the very monsters they mock to bring them to an end.
This maniacal strength will linger in your arms and hands, and with it you'll destroy your real enemies. Exactly as I instruct you.
Pending autopsy findings, I would say that he was attacked from behind by someone with fiendish strength. So what do we have to do? Look for a monster?
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
Behind the scenes in Hollywood's wonderland of make-believe, where pretty girls parade their pulchritude, terror stalks with the stealthy steps of death. And death following death permeates the very air you breathe with horror. Mr. Monster Maker of Mayland sells his talents to the devil.
I have a great honor to bestow upon you. I intend to add you two to my collection.
You want on your wall?
As real as I can get them.
See the Master Monster Maker's Chamber of Horrors. in color. How to make a monster.
Oh, classic stuff. Classic stuff. So, How to Make a Monster. So, directed by Herbert L. Strock and written by Herman Cohen and Aben Candle, starring Robert H. Harris, Gary Conway, Gary Clark, and Morris Ankrum. The film follows a special effects designer who is the guy who's the mind behind I Was a Teenage Werewolf and I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and I Was a Teenage Caveman. And his unceremonious termination from the studio because audiences just don't love monster movies anymore. They like titillating stuff and they like pretty girls. So he is unceremoniously fired after production of the latest film and then decides to get his revenge on the studio that destroyed him by unleashing the real versions of his monsters by brainwashing the actors who played those roles, making them up like monsters and sending them after the studio heads and the people that he blames for his termination, ultimately, culminating in his descent into absolute madness. Interesting note is that the film in its last, I think it's in the last reel, changes to color when they enter into the madman's lair, when everything goes into color, and you can see he has all the masks all around, all the things he's created all over his house. And that's when it changes to color and gets really, really interesting for the fire effect, and it makes the fire effect really, really pop, considering that the entire movie up to this point was in black and white. But I particularly dug this. This is my favorite of the ones that we watched. I thought this one was really, really good. Robert H. Harris was a fantastic character actor. I thought he was the driving point of this movie. He's so creepy and weird and kind of indicative of some of the people that work in the industry that do very, very specialized things like special effects and making monsters and creating stuff. But there's an interesting story behind this particular movie, and that is there is the very real possibility that the plot for this film was actually stolen from Ed Wood. And I was like, so I tried to find as much as I could on this, but his widow, Ed Wood's widow, Kathy, made the claim in 1992 that the idea was stolen from her husband by AIP producer Sam Arkoff.
Yeah, I read up on that. It was supposed to be, instead of being the makeup artist, it was a monster, and it was going to be Lugosi. Because that was the one great actor at his disposal. And I don't know, like, maybe at its core they did, but they swore it was worked from the bottom up. Stranger things have happened.
This is true. Exactly. Now, Arkoff denied the claim, said it was completely unfounded, that Herman Cohen actually came up with the original plot, but there's a lot of similarity there. And this is what's weird. And I found this to be really, because obviously we have an idea of Ed Wood and Ed Wood's productions, and I kind of like in my kind of headcanon, I like the idea that Ed Wood came up with an idea that was really, really solid, that was really good. The idea of, okay, so Ed apparently didn't like Arkoff. That he just hated everything that he was about. And Ed gave them a script for approval, and they changed the characters around. And Ed, like I said, Eddie had written it for Lugosi, and it was about an old horror actor who couldn't get work anymore, so he became his monster, take revenge on the studio. They changed it up to what we see in the movie. And Tony Regime says the plot might have been inspired by Ed Wood's idea. But if Ed Wood came up with the idea, and they took it and they altered it enough in order to get by so they could make the movie, at these kinds of days, if you release a movie and releasing movies that were really, really similar like this was not something that took place. The idea of the mockbuster was not a thing that existed. So, like, if Ed Wood made a version starring Bela Lugosi and AIP dropped a movie that was similar, if that came out first or whatever, Ed Wood wouldn't have done anything. In fact, he wouldn't have been able to get money for it because the idea's already been done. They wanted new ideas, new, fresh ideas. So, but this idea that Ed Wood, given Plan 9 from Outer Space and other things that he made, but came up with this idea that ultimately the studio stole from him. And you gotta wonder, like, the genius of Ed Wood, kind of like the wild, crazy genius of Ed Wood, was hampered by the studio, because this was a time when studios would. I hate to slam the golden age of Hollywood. It gave us a lot of the things that we love, but there was nefarious shit going on. These guys were like, some of these studio heads were like freaking Teamsters. You know, they would take what they could get to try and make as much money as they could, and I could see why that would chafe, and the very real possibility that Ed Wood had a really excellent idea ripped from him, just because Ed Wood didn't play well with the authority figures, because the mentalities were different, which I found was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and it's just the one thing you did see back then. Like you said, there's no mockbusters, but you've got studios like this one, API, that'll take an original idea and they basically spin it off. So instead of Frankenstein, it's I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, et cetera, et cetera. But back then, like you said, the bigger studios, those studio heads were in complete control. And I don't just mean at a studio, because there's a story about Buddy Ebsen that, I can't remember which studio head it was. He told him he wouldn't be owned. And that guy damn near ruined Ebsen's career. Like, he couldn't get anything in the movies from then on. That's part of why I think he ended up consigned to TV, in his later years. But yeah, it does really have a feel of a vengeance film on it. And you spend the whole time, like, bouncing back and forth between, it's like, who do I like? Who do I want to win? And by the end of it, you know, the makeup artist is murdering left and right, so he's the obvious bad guy. But at first, the studio reps that come in, they're just dickheads, and you're like,
absolute.
Okay.
There is a very, very obvious studio commentary on this. Now, AIP is who produced it, but it would be, in the name of the studio was changed to AIS, which was an American International Studio or something. And so they changed it to AIS, and they had the situation, and the commentary, which is why I actually kind of consider this one a little bit meta, kind of another meta horror, because we talked about a meta horror last week, but I think this one is kind of meta as well. I got the sense, and you can agree, you disagree with me if you like, maybe it's just me, because I heard about the Ed Wood story first. Maybe it's just me, but I got the sense that somebody behind the scenes of this movie knew something that was going on and was getting something across in the telling of this, that this is a commentary on studio mentalities, and the people that are behind the scenes, the people who are working in offices, all these people, the actors, the directors, the studio hand, the stage hands, everybody in the production, these are all just numbers on a sheet to them. They don't care. It's all about money, and it's all about bankability. And that is seen not only in the studios, but in the scene with the agent. When the agent walks up, and it's kind of the mentality where when the special effects dude is trying to tell the actor who played I Was a Teenage Frankenstein that you're known for being a monster, for playing the monster. It will be, and he knows the insides and outs of the studio. He says it'll be very, very hard for you to get work in this, and why he's able to manipulate them into committing the murders for him. But then his agent shows up, and his agent deals with it. It deals with the same situation. It was like, he's my product. I can sell him. I can get him work. I don't need you talking to him. He's protecting his investment. That's what these people are. The commentary that these are all just commodity. That everyone involved in the filmmaking industry is just a commodity, which was the mentality at the time. And I found it to be wonderfully kind of subversive, and a commentary on the blurring the lines between fiction and reality. But I enjoyed this one the most, also because of the fantastic effects. I love seeing I Was a Teenage Werewolf come back, kind of a crossover film, because that was kind of the idea of like Werewolf meets Frankenstein and bringing the monsters together into the shared kind of dark universe. And I like this one the way they did that as well, because we got to see the caveman, and we got to see Frankenstein, and we got to see I Was a Teenage Werewolf all in the same movie. And something else interesting is that big fire scene at the end, there were legitimate costume pieces that were used in films were actually destroyed in that fire.
Oh, I didn't know they were destroyed. I know they used them. And there's some that you can see that are imitations of others from other movies, because that one, you're talking about Night of the Triffids earlier, I think it was that one of the dead center rear that reminded me I believe it was that one, but it was definitely from another movie. But that's terrible that they were destroyed.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're gonna go out, blaze of glory. But yeah, it's meta across the board because it steps out from, they're filming that I was a teenage werewolf or I was a teenage Frankenstein, and they step out from that and they cover that and they talk about the studio system and everything. But also, like, they show the costumes, and then so API was not a huge studio. They didn't have their own
AIP.
physical AP. Sorry,
yeah,
they did not even have their own. Took over another and put up a temporary sign up front over the normal sign when they were filming this. So, and this is winding down the end of the monster generation because it didn't pick back up really until it's winding down now. It dips in the US. It didn't pick back up really until Hammer got a hold of it in Britain. So it's even making commentary on the fact that this is a studio whose big their bread and butter is drifting. And their way to combat that is to talk about that and put that to a movie and cover that. So yeah, it's extremely meta. It's got commentary on not just the situation like the studio system. It's called that because the studios controlled everything, but just what the general thing that's happening in Hollywood at that point. And it's especially applicable because you're going from an era to where everybody's watching monster movies to an era where it's the quote unquote nerds that are watching the monster movies, and it becomes an almost cult trade where you've got to, if you want to get anything related to monster movies at that point, you've got to subscribe to the magazines and order the models and all the cool stuff that's hyper collectible now.
Oh, I see that Arian Rod joined the chat. Good to see you, Arian Rod. Thank you so much for being here, bud. I think it's Arian Rod. Good to see you. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, going back on the many of Dumont's children that were destroyed in the fire. They were props that were originally created for AIP films. They were created by Paul Blaisdell. And there was the She Creature, It Conquered the World, Invasion of the Saucer Man, and Attack of the Puppet People. So were legitimate props that they brought in because, like you said, AIP just wasn't really functioning. They shot this film actually over at Ziv Studios because they didn't have their own production studio yet, and they sacrificed those props specifically for that film. So when you see those things burning and falling off their little pedestals and burning on the walls, those are the legit things. They're like the legit props from previous films, which is such a shame. It was like, oh no, but hey, I like that they went there. I like that they had the balls to do it, and of course, the effects of the time. Bringing back I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, bringing back I Was a Teenage Werewolf. The effects are fantastic and are just it was fun. It was fun seeing the kind of mentality of the time. What really struck me was the interrogation scene. And because there's a point in time where the cops are, they're hot on the trail of the killer, because there's a killer. 3 people have been killed on the studio, and we got to figure out what's going on. Is the brutal mentality of the police in this one, because these guys were not joking around. Because you got the lieutenant who's like trying to be all calm and cool and talking to this way, but you got the sergeant who's like, tell us who did it, like that when he grabs the dude by his hand. It was like, wow, not what you'd expect. But also, I got to throw it out there, for the time period. Casting an African American actress in that role as one of the major witnesses, I thought was really impressive. And AIP had a reputation for pushing boundaries and doing things like this and going for broke. I like that it was a reminder that there were still major efforts out there to bring representation to people and to really call out the kind of distasteful things that were going on and to stand against those things. Which is a reminder that, you'll see this this current kind of like through all of AIP's films. And to put them and it reminded me of that, kind of put him in a new light, that in the days of Universal and MGM, that AIP was still out there trying to produce films that really set a new standard. And inspired a lot of what we have today. That inspired, all throughout Hammer Horror and allowed us to have progressive, strong female characters and good equal representation for minority actors across the board. I enjoyed it. I really did. I dug it.
Well, the whole movie has got big fuck you energy all over it.
Big fuck you
Yeah,
energy.
I mean, it's because they're like, it's the guy's gonna kill everybody. They're shutting the or changing the studio, shutting him down, so he's gonna kill him. They burn the masks. I mean, it's just like, you know, if our day is done and we're going out, we're just destroying all our shit before we go. And I'm like, I get that. I've had that job.
It's wild. The film is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and it's probably the best one of the ones that we got to talk about tonight. I love going back and revisiting this one, and just getting a sense of the films that we talked about tonight, and the ideas of subverting cultural expectations. Which our love will always kind of go back to classic horror, because the people who were making films back then, I will say that this is true and honest artistry, because when they were trying to break ground and because it's a business, you got to make movies to make money, and so, but the people willing to take these big risks, because that's when this is all about. You've got studios out there that have all the money and have all the power, and so you got to try and innovate every way that you can, and got to try to push boundaries and really show people something that they were not expecting. You can only do, like, you know, when the Great Train Robbery came out and the train was coming at the screen and people freaked out, because you can only have moments like that once. So AIP was constantly trying to push those boundaries. And I always look back, despite all the negative things, all of the misogyny, all of the blacklisting, and all of the grossness that was going on, all the abuse of power, the things that some people kind of think of old Hollywood for. You still had artists out there really trying to make something special and make something new, regardless of everything standing in the way. The production code, studio politics, contract obligations. You had people trying to do their best to tell really, really good stories. And AIP was strong in that. And I liked having that reminder of that, which was kind of cool, going back and revisiting these.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about having a smaller studio. You didn't, because of equipment cost, studio cost, stuff, you didn't have the independence like you do now, or if you did, they were Ed Wood. But you had the smaller studios that were doing something a little bit different, and that's the nice thing about horror too, is because we talk about horror as hyperbole and everything, is that we get to, being in the day and age we are now, we're not perfect, we're still struggling with stuff, but we get to explore that through horror now. So you don't have to look back and cast this off completely. And they're just, in the end, they're something where you can just sit down and just enjoy it. I mean, it's entertaining enough to keep you entertained. I mean,
right.
But it's not, you know, it's not the deep thinker that's going to make you stay up all night if you had a hard day. And they're just plain comforting to me, honestly.
So I see that somebody had I think Thor Rasmussen brought up, said Weekend Horror, because this film only had one, it was the final scene, the ending scene, that was in color, which I think is the only way it could have been done to get the fantastic fire effects of the whole place burning down. Thor Rasmussen brings up, a long time ago I saw a black and white Japanese movie about the kidnapping of a boy to show that the parents were ready to pay the ransom. They were to make a smoke signal with green smoke. Then that was the only color scene in the movie. Do you know what movie I'm talking about? I don't, actually. That doesn't ring a bell. I'm not as terribly versed on like old school Japanese stuff. Like I know Akira Kurosawa films, but there was a lot that was out there, and I don't recall that off the top of my head. I may have to do some research. Does that ring a bell for you, Aaron?
No, not off the top of my head. I would have to look through it, because I'm trying to think. The only things I can think of where they use the effects back then off the top of my head are, I think, Hexen and stuff. Because what they would have to do is go through, they would film it, and then the ones that predated color film, they would have to go through and apply color pigment to anything. So, like in Hexen and a couple others, they did color smoke by putting pigment on top of the actual strip for the smoke, which means they had to do it for every single strip,
every frame
that went out. Yeah.
Andrew, I'll have to do some research on that. I appreciate the question, Thor. I really do. that kind of brings me to this one. The big thing about this, and I think what, about how to make a monster, was its kind of meta idea. It was, the idea of using fake monsters to commit real crimes. The meta horror. Meta horror has always been really, really interesting to me because of the commentary on the genre, the commentary on the culture. And I want to ask the audience, meta horror, yes or no? Do you dig meta horror? Does the commentary on us, the commentary on society, the commentary on the studio, on like filmmaking, the commentary on the genre or the fans of the genre, do you dig it? Do you like that? Is that something that you really, really look forward to? Or do you prefer your horror films a little bit more just classic fictional storytelling that doesn't really have any additional commentary that really forces us to ask questions? Does it take away or does it add to it? Meta horror, yes or no? Let us know in the comments below, or of course at weekinhorror@gmail.com. And of course your thoughts on it. We'd love to hear what you think.
I like it until it tries to break my damn brain, and then I'm done with it.
All right, I think it's about that time. It looks like it's trivia time. Dun 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 for the classic effect. And we're gonna give away another Week in Horror pint glass, the official pint glass of Week in Horror that features the artwork from our limited edition number 1 shirt, the original artwork that Joshua Olsen made for us for season 1. This one is fantastic. I love the artwork on this one. It looks fantastic on the pint glass. So you can win one of these if you have the correct answer to this trivia question. I'm going to make sure I have the live chat up. Do you have the live chat up?
I've got it up. Yep.
You got it up? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I've got it up.
All right, so let's do this. Aaron, give him the question. Get those Google fingers ready.
All right, everybody ready? What legendary horror host character was invented by Jerry G. Bishop for Chicago's WFLD TV in 1970? So what legendary horror host character was invented by Jerry G. Bishop for Chicago's WFLD TV in 1970?
The first answer to this, the correct answer, is going to get yourself a Week in Horror official pint glass. What do we got?
We got it. It's Jinju.
Jinju got it.
Yep. Spelling's funky, but
I'd say, yeah, that's kind of it. But yeah, we don't punish spelling here. We really, really don't. But Jinju got it. He nailed it with Svengoolie. Oh, there are a bunch of ones like that. Tony Regime said Wolfman Jack. Close. He was radio. Arian Rod also said Svengoolie as well as wrote an OS name, and NA had no clue. But yes, Jinju, you are correct. It was Svengoolie is the one. God dang, I thought that was going to be a tough one, but apparently
no. Jen watched it at the time. Yeah, he's up there. So
Week in Horror pint glass, and let me write that down for Jinju. Fantastic, Jinju. We are going to get that printed out and sent to you ASAP. I began to thought it was Elvira a little bit after, a little bit after, and then of course Saravella says, "Yeah, I didn't know," but yeah, congratulations to Jinju. The answer was Svengoolie. And Svengoolie is currently played by another actor now. I would love to have him on the show sometime. I would love to sit down and have a chat with him, given the decades of he's arguably, I think, the most award-winning horror host out there. Horror character in the vein of Seymour and Elvira and Vampira. I think that he knocks it out of the park. Svengoolie is fantastic.
Well, Elvira probably gets more press, but Elvira is also inspired by Svengoolie and others. Elvira is second generation at earliest. So.
I think after Vampira, right?
Yeah, they took, and there's a whole story to it because she started out, they wanted to do her. She had this whole Valley Girl because she was one of the my mind's gone blank. She was in the comedy group Cheech and Chong and some of the others, but she had a Valley Girl thing that she did, and she came in and did that, and they did change over time, and they take some inspiration from here and there. But yeah, Vampire was the big physical inspiration, and she was way less. They focused way less on her assets in the early costumes. But yeah, she you can see in the early artwork that they took a lot from that.
I'm always reminded, and I love it because my mind always just goes there with Cassandra Peterson. Oh, just Elvira. Was that picture of Elvira, Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman, and Tracy Lords all together at the same party, and like the picture of the three together. You ever seen that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Tracy, the Groundlings. That was the name of the troop. Which there are a ton of people that come out of the Groundlings that are famous now, but she was one of the big crew. That's why she's in. She knew them, and then Cheech and Chong, and they're in one of the movies. She's in that as just her redheaded self, and Paul Rubens is the desk clerk and stuff. But yeah, they all knew each other back in the day.
Oh, fantastic. I love the way it all comes together in the end. All right. Well, that is going to bring another episode of Week in Horror to a close. Thank you all so much for listening, and we truly hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next week when we look back at the vicious slasher Minutes to Midnight, the legendary Corman Poe entry, Tales of Terror, the creature feature sequel, Alligator 2, The Mutation, and the mythology expanding Candyman 3, Day of the Dead. A massive shout out to all of our amazing patrons who continue to help us make Week in Horror the incredible success that it has become. Thank you all so very, very much. You see your names down there on the banner. Thank you all. We couldn't do it without you. Joshua Olsen does all of the amazing art we have for the show, and his designs are absolutely incredible. Hit up his store at badsamurai.store to see all of his newest creations. I think you'll find something there that you'll love. badsamurai.store. For more horror fun, be sure to follow us on all the socials for daily horror posts, and be sure to combat the evil algorithm by dropping a comment, liking, subscribing, and smashing the living fuck out of that bell. And lastly, if you love what we do here and would like to and are able to support our production, you can by joining our fellow patrons and enjoying the tasty benefits of one of our many tiers. But if Patreon is not your favorite stalking method, you can always support us directly through our PayPal. Links to all of this, including our Discord community where you can hang out with us, are in the description below. And remember, the goal is global horror domination, and we can't do it without you, our amazing audience, so pretty please, with the severed infested head of Clint Howard on top, go share the absolute fuck out of our little show. Thank you all for being the greatest audience a horror podcast could have. I am JL.
I'm Aaron.
And we will see you all next week. And as always, stay scared.